I'm thinking... Now I have an idea.
Let's ride down, and baby, let your mind roll on. Hey, walk
Hi,
right
J Philosopher here, along with my friends Socrates, Athena, and the Masters of Comedy and Tragedy. I'm going to be talking about the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, a 19th century philosopher, and I'm going to be quoting from many of his works in which he attacks what he calls Christendom. And I'm not going to answer these attacks. I'm just going to repeat them, and you can get an idea for yourself how he felt. And I'm going to kind of add a few comments, maybe, how I interpret the sayings. But for the most part, it's just his quotations and his attitude towards Christianity. And I think it's important to understand it. He's often called a Christian philosopher, and I don't particularly see him that way. It was illegal at that point in time in his country to attack Christianity, so he had no choice but to often say he was attacking from a Christian point of view, but I think you'll find a little bit of irony in what he says, and at points he actually comes straight out in his attacks, and it's not so ironic. From his writings too, with ethical or religious essays, he says, the genius plans this, his self-development, as an activity. A genius lives within himself. The apostle had no authority. He can't prove himself. He can only say, I am called by God, do with me what you will, flog me, persecute me, but my last words will be my first. I am called by God, and I make you eternally responsible for what you do to me. So he's contrasting being an apostle and being a genius, and the genius kind of works out his own world and lives within himself. He's called by himself primarily, whereas the apostle just gets this strange idea sent into his head, which he imagines is from God, and he can just lay it out. He can't give you reasons or explain anything, but he just has to go with it, and he just says, I'm going to go with it, and kill me if you want, but that's it. So that's the difference between a genius and an apostle. The apostle is certainly not a genius, the opposite of a genius. And from Practicing Christianity, Kierkegaard says, the God-man is not the union of God and men. Such terminology is a profound optical illusion. The God-man is the unity of God and an individual human being. That the human race is or is supposed to be in kinship with God is ancient paganism. But that an individual human being is God, that is Christianity. And this particular human being is the God-man. Humanly speaking, there is no possibility of a crazier composition than this, either in heaven or on earth, or in the abyss, or in the most fantastic aberration of thought. It is an offense to God. So this is what he's saying about Christianity. It is an offense to God. So you're bringing God down to the level of man. Nothing can be more offensive to God. So that's his idea of Christianity, the craziest thing ever invented. More or less paraphrasing him there. And then talking about Christ himself, he says that there's nothing to admire in Christ's life. Quote, Christ was born and lived in a basement, not one person contemporary with him lived so abased. There was unconditionally nothing to admire unless one wanted to admire poverty, misery, contempt, etc. He was not even exempted from the worst, being pitied, a pitiable object of sympathy. No, there was truly not the least thing to admire. Again, this is from Practicing Christianity. So people say how they admire Christ, but he's saying, no, there was nothing to admire there. Lived a wretched life. Lived a life of poverty, misery, contempt. All his friends abandoned him. When he was crucified. The punishment for a slave. How horrible. Okay. Kierkegaard attacks both Catholicism and Protestantism. This is how he attacks Catholicism from his work, Forced Self-Examination. He says, the gospel grace was changed into a new law, more rigorous with people than the old law through petty self-torments. They had made God just as petty. So Catholicism made God into a petty monarch, basically. And then he says about Luther, there's always a secular mentality that no doubt wants to have the name of being Christian, but wants to become Christian as cheaply as possible. It was this secular mentality that said, so we take his words, his doctrine, and we are free from all works. Long live Luther. What can be cheaper than faith? It costs not a penny. So the people who embraced Luther, they were happy to do it because they were saving money, right? No more giving to the Catholic Church, buying indulgences. Now you can have faith cheaply and save your money. So that's what he thinks of Protestantism. And he says that's the history of Christianity, really. He says the history of Christianity, a story of steadily scaling down the price of what it is to be Christian, imitation of Christ. This has been abolished. Christianity is the gentle comfort, a kind of insurance for eternity. So yeah, you buy your insurance, you give to the church, and you get an insurance policy saying that you're going to be saved for all eternity. So that's what they're selling, and that's in the book Judge for Yourself. Here's another one. The Middle Ages conceived of Christianity along the lines of action, life, existence, transformation, scourging oneself, crawling on one's knees, standing on one leg, first error, meritoriousness, hucksters who sold the good works of others at fixed but cheap prices. So all these saints of the Catholic Church, they did all these horrible things to themselves, and so because they did horrible things to yourself, you can then pay the church, and the church will give you their good deeds to get you into heaven. That's the Catholicism. And then again, attacking Luther, he says, Luther, a person is justified solely by faith. Therefore, in God's name, to hell with the Pope and all his helpers, and away with the monastery, fasting, scourging, and all the monkey antics. But after Luther, faith, I wonder if it is to be found on earth. So he thinks Luther was okay, but everyone who came after him, none of those people really had faith. Again, that's from Judge for Yourself.